Welcome to True Crime Case Files, the podcast where we delve into the most intriguing and mysterious criminal cases. In today's episode, we uncover the shocking events surrounding the murder of Gil Bozeck, a computer technician from Omaha, Nebraska. Join us as we unravel the secrets of a clandestine fight club and the devastating consequences that ensued. Gil Bozeck, a 49-year-old computer technician employed by the Bank of Omaha, was known for his expertise in his field. With his extensive knowledge of computer systems, he played a vital role in maintaining the bank's digital infrastructure. Colleagues described him as meticulous, dedicated, and always willing to go the extra mile to ensure the smooth operation of the bank's technology. In his spare time, Gil pursued his passion for judo, a martial art he had been practicing for over a decade. His commitment to the sport earned him a reputation as an enthusiastic and skilled practitioner, often participating in local tournaments. His love for judo not only kept him physically fit, but also provided an outlet for the stresses of his daily life. Recently divorced from his wife, Olivia, Gil was trying to rebuild his life. The divorce had taken a toll on him emotionally, but he remained determined to move forward. Friends and family were supportive, encouraging him to focus on his work and hobbies to find solace during this challenging time. June of 2001 was a significant month for Gil. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, as he had just purchased a cozy townhouse in a quiet neighborhood of Omaha. The house, adorned with a white picket fence, symbolized his aspirations for a fresh start. Gil meticulously decorated the interior, carefully selecting furniture and artwork to create a warm and inviting atmosphere. Little did Gil know that his journey towards a brighter future would be abruptly cut short. One afternoon, tragedy struck. The details surrounding his murder are shrouded in mystery, leaving investigators puzzled and the community in shock. In a quiet suburb of Omaha, Nebraska, tragedy struck on a sunny afternoon. Gil Bozeck, a 49-year-old computer technician and devoted father, met a shocking and untimely demise that would send shockwaves through the community. This heinous crime, reminiscent of a real-life episode of Dateline or 48 Hours, left investigators scrambling for answers. Recently divorced, Gil was in the process of rebuilding his life. He had custody of his son, who was the center of his world. On that fateful day, Gil had taken on the responsibility of picking up snacks for his son's soccer game. Little did he know that this innocent errand would be his last. As Gil approached the local Hy-Vee supermarket, a bustling hub of activity in the heart of Omaha, he could not have foreseen the horror that awaited him. Amidst the mundane sounds of shopping carts and chatter, a single gunshot rang out, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. Chaos erupted as shoppers and employees scrambled for safety, their lives forever altered by the sudden violence that unfolded before their eyes. Gil, caught in the crosshairs of a cold-blooded killer, fell to the ground, his life slipping away with each passing moment. The scene was discovered by a passerby, whose identity remains undisclosed to protect their privacy. Overwhelmed by the gruesome sight, this witness wasted no time in alerting the authorities, desperate for justice to be served. News of Gil Bozeck's murder spread like wildfire throughout the tight-knit community of Omaha. The local media, including the Omaha World Herald and KETV Newswatch 7, were quick to report on the shocking event. The senseless act of violence left residents questioning their own safety and the fragility of life itself. As investigators descended upon the crime scene, painstakingly collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses, the search for answers began. The motive behind this brutal murder remained elusive, leaving the community on edge. With each passing day, the weight of the unsolved case grew heavier, and the memory of Gil Bozeck continued to haunt those who knew him. The first responders arrived at the scene within minutes of the 911 call. They found Gil Bozeck lying motionless on the asphalt, a bullet hole in his chest. He was pronounced dead on arrival. The detectives assigned to the case, Leutner and Rodriguez, followed shortly after. They secured the perimeter and began their investigation. They collected the shell casing, which indicated that the shooter had used a 9mm handgun. They also reviewed the security camera footage from the Hy-Vee store, which captured the moment of the shooting. They saw a dark-colored sedan pull up next to Gil's car, a window roll down, and a flash of light. Then the sedan sped away, leaving behind a cloud of smoke. The detectives interviewed the witness who had called 911, as well as other bystanders who had seen or heard the shooting. They learned that Gil had been a regular customer at the Hy-Vee and that he had been on his way to buy some snacks for his son's soccer game. They also learned that he had been a computer technician at the Bank of Omaha and that he had recently divorced his wife, Olivia. The detectives decided to search Gil's home, hoping to find some clues about his personal life and possible enemies. What they discovered there shocked them. Gil had a secret hobby that he had kept hidden from everyone. He was addicted to pornography, and not just any kind. He had a collection of images and videos that depicted extreme violence and degradation. He also had magazines and DVDs that featured the same kind of content, some of which were illegal. One of the officers who searched his home told KETV that it was very erotic and very violent. The detectives wondered if Gil's porn addiction had anything to do with his murder. Could he have offended someone with his twisted tastes? Could he have been involved in some kind of underground network? Or could he have been the victim of a random act of violence? The detectives had many questions, but few answers. They were determined to find out who killed Gil Bozeck and why. The first person the police wanted to talk to was Olivia Lee Bozeck, the ex-wife of Gil Bozeck. Olivia and Gil had been married for 15 years, but their relationship had fallen apart after Olivia discovered Gil's secret life. She had found out that Gil was part of a clandestine group of men who met every other week to engage in brutal fistfights. This group, known as the Secret Fight Club, was inspired by the 1999 movie Fight Club, starring Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. Olivia was appalled by Gil's involvement in such a violent and dangerous activity. She confronted him and demanded a divorce. Olivia agreed to cooperate with the police and answer their questions. She met them at her apartment where she lived since the divorce. She told them that she had not seen or spoken to Gil since they had finalized their separation 6 months ago. She said that she had no idea who would want to kill him or why. She also said that she had an alibi for the time of the murder. She had been at work as a receptionist at a local dentist's office. She provided the police with the name and number of her boss, who confirmed her story. However, the police noticed that Olivia was not very emotional about Gil's death. She seemed angry and bitter, rather than sad or shocked. She also made some disparaging remarks about Gil, calling him a loser and a freak. She said that she was glad to be rid of him, and that she hoped he would rot in hell. The police wondered if Olivia was hiding something, or if she had hired someone to kill Gil. They decided to keep her under surveillance and to dig deeper into her background. Another suspect in the case was Ken Galgastani, a 37-year-old bank manager who had moved to Omaha from Van Nuys, California, a few months before the murder. Ken was one of Gil's co-workers at the Bank of Omaha, and also one of his fellow members in the Secret Fight Club. He was the one who had introduced Gil to the club after they had bonded over their mutual interest in judo and martial arts. Ken was a charismatic and confident man who had a reputation for being a ladies' man. He had a knack for seducing women, and he did not limit himself to one partner. He was also open to experimenting with his sexuality, and he had no qualms about having sex with other men. In fact, he had had sexual encounters with several members of the Fight Club, including Gil. The police brought Ken in for questioning, and he agreed to cooperate. He admitted that he had been involved with Gil, but he claimed that it was nothing serious, just a casual fling. He said that he had no feelings for Gil, and that he had no reason to kill him. He also said that he had an alibi for the time of the murder. He had been at a Starbucks, meeting with a potential client for the bank. He showed the police his receipt and gave them the name and number of the client, who verified his story. However, the police noticed that Ken was not very forthcoming about his relationship with Gil. He seemed to downplay the extent and the frequency of their encounters. He also seemed to be nervous and uneasy, as if he was hiding something. The police wondered if Ken was telling the truth, or if he had a darker motive to harm Gil. They decided to keep him under surveillance and to check his phone records and bank statements. The case took a surprising turn when the police stumbled upon a crucial piece of evidence. It was a series of medical records obtained from the Omaha Medical Center. The records belonged to Jonathan Duke Ronway, the manager of the Hy-Vee store where Gil Bozeck was shot. The records revealed that Duke had been treated for a broken leg, a fractured rib, and a concussion. The injuries had occurred on May 29, 2001, just 4 days before the murder. The police were intrigued by this discovery. They wondered how Duke had sustained such serious injuries and if they had any connection to the crime. They decided to pay Duke a visit at his home, where he was recovering from his wounds. They asked him about his injuries, and he told them that he had been in a car accident. He said that he had lost control of his vehicle and crashed into a tree. He showed them his car, which was badly damaged. However, the police were not convinced by Duke's story. They noticed that his car had no bloodstains and that the damage did not match his injuries. They also noticed that Duke was nervous and evasive, as if he was hiding something. They decided to dig deeper into his background, and they uncovered a shocking secret. Duke was a member of a secret fight club, a group of men who met every other week to engage in brutal fistfights. The club was inspired by the 1999 movie Fight Club, starring Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. The police learned that Gil Bozeck was also a member of the club, and that he and Duke were known as blood rivals. They had fought each other several times, and their last fight had left Duke with a broken leg. The police realized that Duke had lied to them about his injuries, and that he had a motive to kill Gil. They wondered if he had hired someone to shoot Gil, or if he had done it himself. They decided to question him again and to confront him with the evidence. They hoped that he would crack under the pressure and confess to the murder. One of the key players in the case was Jonathan Duke Ronway, the manager of the Hy-Vee store where the murder took place. Duke was not only a witness, but also a suspect. He had a history of animosity with Gil Bozeck, stemming from their involvement in the secret fight club. The club was a group of 8 men who met every other week to engage in brutal fistfights. Duke and Gil were known as blood rivals, and they had fought each other several times, each time escalating the violence and the stakes. Duke had an alibi that seemed to clear him of any suspicion. He had been injured in a fight with Gil just 4 days before the murder. Gil had broken Duke's leg, and Duke had been hospitalized for 2 days. He had been released on June 1, 2001, the day before the murder. He had been at home, resting and recovering, when the shooting occurred. He had several witnesses who could vouch for his whereabouts, including his wife, his doctor, and his fellow club members. However, the police were not satisfied with Duke's alibi. They wondered if he had orchestrated the murder or if he had an accomplice who had carried out the hit. They decided to investigate Duke further and to look for any evidence that could link him to the crime. They searched his home, his car, and his phone records. They also interviewed his coworkers, his neighbors, and his friends. They hoped to find a crack in his story or a motive for his hatred. They were determined to find out if Duke had anything to do with Gil Bozeck's murder. The mystery of Gil Bozeck's murder was finally solved, thanks to a crucial piece of evidence. It was a surveillance video obtained from a gas station near the Hy-Vee store. The video showed a dark-colored sedan, matching the description of the shooter's vehicle, pulling into the station. The driver got out of the car and walked into the store. He was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, but the camera managed to capture a glimpse of his face. He was James Dean Pavel, a 29-year-old construction worker and part-time trucker. Known for his emotional nature and desire for romantic love, he was also a member of the secret fight club, and he had a personal connection to Gil Bozeck. The police tracked down James and arrested him at his home. They searched his car and found the 9mm handgun that had been used to kill Gil. They also searched his phone and found several text messages and voicemails from Gil, indicating that they had been in a sexual relationship. The messages also revealed that Gil had broken up with James just a day before the murder. James had been unable to accept the rejection and had decided to take revenge on Gil. He had followed him to the Hy-Vee and shot him in cold blood. James was stunned by his arrest and did not say a word. He was taken to the police station where he was interrogated by the detectives. They confronted him with the evidence, and asked him to confess. James remained silent and refused to cooperate. He was charged with first-degree murder and taken to jail. The victim's family, who had been waiting for months for answers, were shocked and saddened by the revelation. They had no idea that Gil had been involved in a secret fight club or that he had been in a homosexual relationship. They felt a mix of emotions, ranging from grief and anger to confusion and betrayal. They hoped that James would be brought to justice and that Gil would rest in peace. The case of Gil Bozeck's murder finally reached its conclusion as James Dean Pavel, the man who had shot and killed him, faced trial. The trial, which began on September 10, 2001, just one day before the devastating 9/11 attacks, was one of the most sensational and controversial in Omaha's history. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Vince Donalto, argued that James had acted with premeditation and malice, motivated by jealousy and rage. The defense, represented by attorney Mark Baron Ravness, contended that James had acted in self-defense, fearing for his life after Gil had threatened him. The trial was covered extensively by the local media, including the Omaha World-Herald and KETV7. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Vince Donalto, presented a strong case against James, based on the physical and circumstantial evidence. They showed the jury the surveillance video from the gas station, which captured James's face and his car. They showed them the 9mm handgun, which matched the bullet that had killed Gil. They showed them the text messages and voicemails from Gil, which indicated that they had been in a sexual relationship and that Gil had broken up with James. They also called several witnesses, including the witness who had called 911, the detectives who had investigated the case, and the members of the secret fight club, who testified about James' emotional instability and his obsession with Gil. The defense, represented by attorney Mark Baron Ravness, tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's case by challenging the credibility and the reliability of the evidence. They questioned the quality and the authenticity of the surveillance video, suggesting that it could have been tampered with or edited. They questioned the validity and the accuracy of the ballistics test, suggesting that it could have been flawed or biased. They questioned the relevance and the meaning of the text messages and voicemails, suggesting that they could have been misinterpreted or taken out of context. They also called their own witnesses, including James's friends, family, and co-workers, who testified about James' good character and his troubled past. Throughout the trial, the victim's family endured emotional turmoil, witnessing the proceedings with a mix of hope and anguish. They had to relive the horror of Gil's death and to face the shocking revelations about his secret life. They had to cope with the media attention and the public scrutiny. They had to wait for the jury's verdict and to hope for justice. Ultimately, the jury delivered their verdict after deliberating for 3 days. They found James guilty of first-degree murder and recommended a sentence of life imprisonment without parole. The sentencing left many questioning whether justice had been served, as opinions varied on the severity of the punishment. The impact of the verdict reverberated through the victim's friends and family, forever altering their lives. The aftermath of Gil Bozeck's murder had a lasting impact on the lives of those who were involved in the case. The secret fight club, which had been the source of Gil's death and James's downfall, was disbanded. The remaining members, who had been exposed by the police, decided to end their violent and dangerous hobby. They realized that they had gone too far and that they had to face the consequences of their actions. Jonathan Duke Ronway, the manager of the Hy-Vee store where the murder took place, was one of the most affected by the tragedy. He had witnessed the shooting, and he had been a suspect in the case. He had also been a rival of Gil and a friend of James. He felt a mix of guilt, fear, and anger. He could not cope with the psychological trauma, and he decided to quit his job. He moved to Denver, Colorado, hoping to start a new life. Olivia Lee Bozeck, Gil's ex-wife, was also deeply affected by the tragedy. She had been married to Gil for 15 years, but she had divorced him after discovering his involvement in the secret fight club. She had been angry and bitter towards Gil, but she had also loved him. She was shocked and saddened by his death and by the revelations about his secret life. She had to deal with the media attention and the public scrutiny. She had to raise their son, Lenny, who had lost his father. She tried to move on and to focus on her son's well-being. The victim's family and friends, who had been waiting for justice, were relieved and satisfied by the verdict. They had no sympathy for James Dean Pavel, who had killed Gil out of jealousy. They hoped that he would spend the rest of his life in prison and that he would regret his actions. They also hoped that Gil would rest in peace and that his memory would live on. The story of Gil Bozeck's murder reveals a dark underbelly hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly idyllic community. The secret fight club, jealousy, and betrayal ultimately led to a tragic loss of life. As we conclude this episode of True Crime Case Files, we hope that by shedding light on these events, we can bring some understanding to a senseless act. Join us next time as we delve into another captivating true crime case.
Hey, true crime case solvers, interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe, true crime case solvers.